Next, I'm going to turn it over to Jordyn Stoll. Jordyn, I'm going to let you go ahead and share your screen. And Jordyn is with Trout Unlimited.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for having me and for being here. It's always exciting to tell people about algae because most people aren't very excited about algae usually. So thank you for listening to us. My name's Jordyn Stoll. I'm an aquatic ecologist with Michigan Trout Unlimited. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Didymo, some of the work that we're doing across the state and how you can get involved. Okay, so Didymo or Didymosphenia geminata is a variety of diatom, which is a type of algae. Diatoms are pretty cool in that they build their cell walls out of glass. They're very ornate and beautiful when you look at them under a microscope. If you've ever walked around a stream and noticed that there's kind of a biofilm or a glimmer on the rocks or the surface of the stream that's kind of golden brown, it's probably a biofilm that's largely dominated by diatoms. It's often usually very slippery too, as someone else found out, it sounds like in the chat. They often thrive in cold water, high light environments. So oftentimes in winter, early spring, before the leaves come on, there's it's kind of prime time for diatoms to thrive. They're favorable fish and invertebrate food. So diatoms are unique in that when they photosynthesize, they store their photosynthate or their energy in lipids rather than starches. So you can think of diatoms more like avocados, whereas a lot of other algae, like your green algae, are more like potatoes. Avocados, being very nutritious and lipid rich. And diatoms are unique in that, because they make those glass cell walls, they don't decompose as quickly as other algae. They actually can be stored in the sediment in the bottom of lakes. And because of that, you can take sediment cores of lakes and use them to look at the fossils of algae throughout history, so to speak. And because certain diatoms grow under certain conditions, you can start to get at what conditions might have been like in a lake years ago compared to now, just based off of changes in the diatoms that are present. So overall, diatoms are super neat, in my opinion. Hopefully you think that as well after this talk. But like you've heard from other speakers, there can be some consequences when they don't behave. So Didymosphenia geminata, or Didymo, or rock snot, all the same thing, is a variety of diatom again that causes problems when it blooms. So all this information on the slide is directly from the invasive species info.gov website. In the state of Michigan, Didymo is considered an invasive species. People debate whether it's invasive or not. For my personal opinion, I don't really care. It's kind of semantics, but it is a nuisance species, and if we keep calling it invasive, we can keep getting money to better understand it. So I'm happy to keep calling it invasive for now. It's been around for a while, but it really hasn't started causing problems until recently. So I'll jump into a little bit more on the issues it can cause here soon. But just its appearance. So this picture is taken on the upper manistee back in, I think, 2022. Oftentimes, Didymo blooms people describe them as kind of looking like toilet paper floating around the bottom of a stream. They're wispy. They're not that bright green algae that, like cladophora, like Marcelo was showing you. They're kind of more golden brown to gray in appearance. You can tell the difference from Didymo blooms and other algae by its texture as well. So if you were to walk through a river and spot something like this and to feel it, people usually describe it as feeling more like wet wool rather than being slimy. So it's just a little bit different from your typical algae bloom in more ways than one, but that's one. So in the state of Michigan, Didymo is confirmed on the Boardman River, the Manistee, the Ausable, and the St. Mary's. It hasn't bloomed on the Ausable. However, since we've started sort of looking for it, we're finding that it exists in the background community. And I'll talk a little bit more about what it means to bloom. But in these pictures, this is examples of Didymo blooming, and that it's growing in a large biomass covering the bottom of a stream. Okay. So this picture is from a Didymo bloom in New Zealand, where Didymo is most definitely invasive. You can see that, just how much biomass it can accrue at the bottom of a river. You imagine, the bottom of a river typically being sandy or, gravelly and having, really great habitat. When Didymo grows and turns it into, giant bed of slime, very homogeneous. You can imagine the effect it would have on habitat for all the organisms in that river. But just to kind of emphasize, and Marcella did this too, and that poll at the beginning also kind of touches on this. We lately have been talking about algae in a negative way, and that we kind of think about it when it causes a problem, but overall algae are super critical. Diatoms are the base of aquatic food webs. They're essential to these our stream ecosystems. So we shouldn't overall dislike diatoms or algae. We should recognize that they can be a problem occasionally, but overall are really critical. So just to get back to Didymo, some of its unique ecology. So when you think about harmful algal blooms and a lot of other algae, they generally bloom when there's a lot of nutrients. So if you think of them like plants, you fertilize your plant, they grow like crazy. Didymo's the exact opposite. It seems to consistently bloom or form, these stalks and grow in this crazy, crazy high biomass under really low bioavailable phosphorus, which is just phosphorus that's floating around in the water and able to be taken up by the algae cells. So when that's really sparse, that's when these little buggers go crazy. They also seem to bloom under high light conditions. So when there's plenty of light, the cells are capable of photosynthesizing and growing like crazy. They also seem to like consistent flow. So Didymo blooms are often found downstream of dams that have are kind of consistently releasing cold water from the bottom, and not they like cold water. So like I mentioned earlier, diatoms in general are kind of tend to favor cold water, and Didymo is no exception to that. I say all of this, but not always, because there are some instances where Didymo's been found not under these conditions. So this is a figure from a paper from a study that was done in Connecticut. So just to orient you to this figure, on the bottom, you have concentration of phosphorus being low, medium, and high. And then you have the frequency of Didymo being found in specifically Didymo forming stalks. So the frequency is the number of streams sampled. So at really low phosphorus conditions, they found that in 4 streams, they found Didymo forming stalks. 2 other streams, Didymo was present, but it wasn't forming those stalks. At kind of, still low, but between 5 and 10 micrograms per liter of phosphorus. Didymo's present, it's just in the background biofilm community, but it's not causing problems. It's not forming those stalks or blooming. And then above about 10 micrograms per liter, Didymo doesn't seem to be, present. It's being outcompeted by other algae. It's just not there. And this is a picture of the upper Manistee, where Didymo has been found to bloom. Again, it usually blooms under 5 micrograms per liter of phosphorus in Connecticut, where this other study was done. But on the Manistee, there's some evidence that it might be blooming at higher concentrations than that. So Lake Superior State University has taken some samples to kind of look at water quality and phosphorus alongside when Didymo's blooming. And there's evidence that Didymo's bloomed around 10 micrograms per liter in the upper Manistee. But more data and more investigations needed to really understand what levels of phosphorus might control or support Didymo blooming. In general, Didymo has a lot of effects on the stream ecosystems. I won't go into too much depth on this, but like I kind of mentioned earlier, reduces that habitat diversity. So instead of having different substrates and, you can have a system that's just the entire stream bed's covered in Didymo. It, clogs up the benthic habitat. And then there's also consequences to mat decomposition, just like how Marcella was explaining to you earlier, how, when algae decompose, that process sucks out the oxygen from the water and can cause kind of dead zones or low oxygen zones. Didymo can also negatively impact the macroinvertebrates that are present. So these three taxa here are your EPT, or your bioindicators for good healthy streams. So your Ephemeroptera, your mayflies, your Plecoptera or your stoneflies, and your Trichoptera, your caddisflies. All three of these groups generally you see lower diversity and abundance of them when you have Didymo blooms. You'll see other macroinvertebrates like chironomids and gastropods that do better in Didymo when Didymo's around. But these more sensitive taxa tend to become less abundant, which is unfortunate because they are more of the favored food for a lot of the fish that people tend to be drawn to, such as trout.
And you've got about
Okay,
5 minutes left, Jordyn.
perfect. Thank you so much. So what is Trout Unlimited doing? So generally speaking, our mission is to be proactive across, all cold water conservation topics. Right now, we're trying to monitor the spread across the state. So again, we know it's bloomed in 3 rivers. It's at least present in the Au Sable, but not blooming. So we're trying to better understand the distribution across the state. We're also trying to better understand sort of the habitat conditions and water quality that might be supporting, or not supporting Didymo. We did receive grant funding to expand our initial effort on this. So this effort thus far has sort of been ad hoc, but is going to be more formalized starting in October. So if you were interested and want more information on this, please reach out to me. I'll be sending people sample kits, hosting all sorts of education outreach events, and creating a network of folks who are interested in Didymo to try to sample across the state, get folks to send me samples so I can determine if Didymo is present or not. Yeah, so please contact me if you're interested in participating in this at all. And here's a QR code to use Didymo monitoring website for more information. It also has this Didymo monitoring form that you see on the slide. There's also, I believe, a link in the chat too. So the 3 questions that we're trying to get at with this grant, our key questions are, so at what concentrations of phosphorus does Didymo stock formation begin in Michigan rivers? So kind of what I was getting at earlier, where it seems like somewhere between 5 and 10 is where Didymo's present, and less than that is where, Didymo stock formation seems to happen elsewhere. So we want to know if that's the same in Michigan. Are there other environmental drivers that are important? So things like, different substrate type, temperature, conductivity, flow. So we'll be collecting all of this information on the Manistee, Boardman, and Au Sable to try to get at that. And then, just trying to understand if Didymo is present in more places across the state and just not blooming. So, unless you take a sample and look at it under a microscope, you don't really know if it's there. So again, we're just trying to collect samples everywhere across all times of year to better understand where it's at across the state. So here's a map of all of our samples so far. The green dots are samples that did not contain Didymo. The red dots are samples that did contain Didymo. And so just, what you can do, you can definitely tell people about Didymo, make them aware. You can send me samples and become involved. You can encourage folks to decontaminate their gear. So a couple ways to do that. You can freeze your gear. So if you have a chest freezer, you can throw your waders and any fishing gear that would fit into a trash bag, throw it in your chest freezer overnight. 409 solution is known to work for Didymo. There's a paper that will be coming out soon that demonstrates pretty conclusively that Didymo works to that 409 solution works to decontaminate Didymo from gear. But yeah, I think most importantly, it's just spreading the word, making people aware of this. There's a lot of people, I think, that go fishing or that come in from other places in the world that aren't aware of invasive species, and that invasive species can be spread on angling gear. So, education, outreach, spreading the word, really critical. And without further ado, if anyone has any questions, please shoot me an email. More than happy to, engage with any groups who are interested in having me come to talk about Didymo in a little bit more depth, and to, distribute some sample kits if folks are interested in sending me samples and, knowing if Didymo's in your streams or not. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jordyn. I've got several questions for you popping up in the Q&A box. Someone is wondering what the sampling landscape looks like in the UP.
So I've only taken 4 samples up there. I didn't find Didymo in any of them. Folks want to take samples, they can. So the process is pretty much going out to a stream with a toothbrush and some sample containers and scrubbing rocks or wood, whatever, substrates available, dabbing it in some water, putting in a container with some preservative and sending it off to me. Does that answer their question?
Yeah, we'll just make this an invitation for folks who are in the Upper Peninsula.
Yeah.
Get in touch with Jordyn and get a collection kit. Add to the
Yep.
data.
Yep. And I'll be up there in a few weeks, so get a hold of me sooner than later and I can maybe give you some supplies sooner than later.
Ah, there we go. So we know that Didymo is particularly a problem in rivers. Does Didymo show up in inland lakes?
As a blooming algae, not that I'm aware of. I don't know if anyone else has seen it as a blooming algae there. I know that cells have been found in lakes, that just has washed through being deposited in the lake sediments. But I'm not familiar with it being a blooming issue. Didymo is generally like Julie mentioned, an epilithic, epiphytic. It grows on surfaces. So it's not usually just a free floating diatom. It's pretty bulky and heavy. It usually sinks out of water.
And that's a good reminder that just because it's present doesn't mean that it's necessarily a problem or going to be a problem. But with
Yep,
something like Didymo, where we're still trying to figure out where it is and what it can do, we definitely want to know if it's present.
definitely. Yep. Yep. Yeah, it seems like the conditions have to be right, and the conditions, as far as we can tell right now, are low phosphorus, high light, cold water, clear water. So, but there might be other things in there too. I've just recently saw a paper about conductivity, potentially, water that's exposed to salt water or salt from, like road stream crossings. Most likely wouldn't have a Didymo bloom problem because Didymo maybe doesn't thrive under higher conductivity levels. So
Mm-hmm. Always new things to learn about these things that we share our lakes and streams with.
yes.
Um, I'm going to ask this as a selfish plug way to tee Erica up to talk about one of our programs. Can Didymo be spread from one water body to another from boats that haven't been cleaned? And what can we do about that?
Yes, absolutely can. So we think that Didymo is being spread by angling and recreational use. It can live on gear, especially damp gear like felt sole waders, for up to 40 days out of water. If you are a person with a boat, you can take it to a car wash and spray it off in a car wash. That's a great way to decontaminate. Hit it with some 409, spray it off. You should be good to go. Yeah, definitely decontaminate your gear. Yeah, if anyone sees any suspicious algae that you think is Didymo, give me a call, shoot me an email. Happy to come and check it out or at least receive some samples from you. The other thing I wanted to note is that 409 also works for New Zealand mud snails. So you get, the benefit of taking care of both of those invasive species with one product, which is convenient. So
Yeah, especially since those are both found in the same general areas, at least both
yeah.
kind of northern lower Michigan. So yeah, awesome.
Thanks
Thanks so
everyone.
much, Jordyn.